My name is Nathaniel Carter, and for 20 years I built my family's empire. I thought I was the rightful heir, the one my father trusted. I was wrong. Nate, I gave everything to your brother. Just like that, everything I worked for was ripped away. But if my father thought I'd walk away quietly, he didn't know me at all. Because I don't just play the game. I changed the rules. And this time, I'm taking everything. My name is Nathaniel Carter, and for 20 years I built my family's empire. I thought I was the rightful heir, the one my father trusted. I was wrong. Nate, I gave everything to your brother. Just like that, everything I worked for was ripped away. But if my father thought I'd walk away quietly, he didn't know me at all. Because I don't just play the game. I changed the rules. And this time, I'm taking everything. For a moment, I thought I misheard him. The words felt foreign, like they belonged to someone else's nightmare. Not mine. I tightened my grip on my phone, my knuckles turning white as the sharp edge of betrayal sliced through me. On the other end of the line, my father's voice remained calm, too calm. As if he weren't dismantling my entire life's work in a single breath. As if the last 20 years meant absolutely nothing. You gave everything to Elliot? I finally managed, my voice disturbingly even. Yes. It's already done. My stomach twisted. Carter Holdings, the empire we had built together, was no longer mine. I had spent years believing I was the backbone of this company. That my father saw me as his equal, his natural successor. I was wrong. For 2 decades, I sacrificed everything. I was the one who took our company from a mid-level family firm to a billion-dollar powerhouse. While my father had the name, I was the one who made it mean something. I built our investment strategies. I expanded our portfolio. I pulled us back from the brink of financial collapse more times than I could count. And yet, in the past year, things had started shifting. My father began excluding me from key meetings. Financial reports stopped landing on my desk. Decisions were being made behind closed doors by my brother. Elliot Carter. The golden child. The one my father always wanted. While I spent my 20s in boardrooms and investor meetings, Elliot spent his in nightclubs and luxury resorts, burning through trust fund money like it was infinite. He never cared about the company. He never earned his place in it. And yet, my father had chosen him over me. I should have seen it coming. The missing reports. The hushed conversations between my father and his lawyers. The way Elliot had suddenly become interested in the company after years of neglect. I had been too trusting. Too busy running the business to notice the ground shifting beneath me. And now? They thought they had taken everything. I forced myself to swallow the lump rising in my throat. The view outside my office window blurred as my mind raced through the implications. Thanks for letting me know, I said, my voice devoid of emotion. I could hear my father hesitate on the other end. He had expected something different, a scream, a plea, maybe even a fight. But I gave him nothing. Nate, I know this might seem unfair, but... I hung up. The silence in my office felt suffocating. The weight of what had just happened pressed down on me, heavier than anything I had ever faced. Then something shifted. I inhaled slowly, deliberately, steadying the fire inside me. He thinks this is over. He's wrong. Carter Holdings wasn't just a business. It was my life. And I wasn't going to let them steal it from me. Before we continue the story, I want to connect with all of you, my incredible viewers. Where are you watching from? Drop the flag of your country in the comments below. I'd love to see how far the story is reaching. Now, let's dive back in. I didn't leave my office right away. I sat there, staring at the skyline, my fingers tapping rhythmically against the mahogany desk. The anger simmered beneath the surface, controlled but undeniable. This wasn't just about money. It wasn't about power. It was about respect. And my father had just made a critical mistake. He had underestimated me. Slowly, deliberately, I reached for the black leather notebook hidden in my desk drawer. Inside were the real records, the ones I had kept separate from the official books. Every major decision. Every hidden liability. Every backroom deal my father had made. All of it was here. If he thought he could push me out and walk away unscathed, he was in for a rude awakening. Because I didn't just help build Carter Holdings. I knew where the cracks were. And I knew how to break them open. I flipped through the pages, my mind already working. Carter Holdings wasn't as indestructible as my father wanted to believe. In the past year, under Elliot's so-called leadership, the company had started expanding recklessly. They were over-leveraged, throwing money into new acquisitions without the infrastructure to sustain them. They had built a house of cards. All I had to do was push. But first, I needed allies. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts, stopping at a name that I hadn't dialed in years. Victor Hastings. A former partner. A man my father had once trusted until he didn't. Victor had helped Carter Holdings secure its first major funding round decades ago, but when my father no longer needed him, he was cut out. He had never forgotten it. I hit call. He answered after 2 rings. Nathaniel Carter. Now that's a name I haven't seen on my phone in a long time. I need to meet, I said, cutting straight to the point. It's about my father. There was a pause, then a low chuckle. I figured something was going on. Meet me at the club in an hour. I grabbed my keys and walked out. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. The private club was exactly as I remembered. Dimly lit, filled with old money and men who had built their empires from the ground up. Victor sat in the back, nursing a whiskey, watching me approach with the same calculating look he had always worn. So, he said, swirling the ice in his glass, tell me what happened. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told him everything, the call, the betrayal, the fact that my father had handed everything to Elliot. Victor listened, nodding occasionally, his expression unreadable. When I finished, he leaned back, exhaling slowly. Let me guess, he mused. You want revenge? No, I said, meeting his gaze. I want to build something better, and I want to make sure my father and Elliot realize exactly what they lost. He smirked. Your father always said you had my ruthlessness. I leaned forward. Then you know I won't lose. Victor considered me for a moment, then set his glass down. All right, Nate, he said. Tell me your plan. I exhaled slowly, the fire inside me burning brighter than ever. My father had taken everything from me. Now I was going to take everything from him. Victor leaned back in his chair, studying me with sharp, calculating eyes. His silence wasn't hesitation, it was evaluation. I knew that look well. I had seen my father wear it 1,000 times before, whenever he was deciding whether something or someone was worth his time. Finally, Victor chuckled, shaking his head. Your father played you like a fool, Nate. I didn't flinch. Not for long. His smirk widened. That's what I like to hear. So tell me, what's the first move? I slid my phone across the table. On the screen was a list of Carter Holdings' biggest vulnerabilities. The cracks in the foundation my father and Elliot were too arrogant to see. Mitchell and Crane. Haverton Logistics. The Keystone Group. Companies they had recently acquired. Companies they had overpaid for. And companies that were now sitting on massive debt. Victor let out a low whistle. They really went all in, huh? I nodded. My father always believed growth meant expansion. But he never understood that if you expand too fast without control, you collapse under your own weight. Victor's fingers drummed against his glass. So, you're not planning to go after Carter Holdings directly? No, I said, a slow smile forming. I don't need to. I leaned forward, my voice steady. Elliot is running a company he doesn't understand. He's making impulsive decisions, throwing money at deals just to prove he belongs. But he doesn't. He's not a builder, he's a spender. And if there's one thing I know about reckless spenders. I paused, letting the moment stretch. They burn through cash faster than they can earn it. Victor grinned. And you're going to speed up the process. Exactly. The plan was simple. Destabilize Carter Holdings from the inside. I knew where their biggest contracts were. I knew which suppliers had weak agreements, which investors were already nervous, and which board members had their doubts. I didn't have to destroy them. I just had to give them a little push. And then, they would fall apart on their own. Victor swirled the last of his whiskey, considering me carefully. You've thought this through. I've had 20 years to think it through, I said coldly. For a moment, he said nothing. Then he reached for his phone. All right, Nate, he said. Let's make some calls. The first cracks appeared within a week. It started with a single deal. Carter Holdings had been in talks to acquire Harlan Tech, a mid-sized logistics company that would have strengthened their supply chain. It was a high-stakes move, one that I had originally spearheaded before my father shut me out. Now, Elliot was leading the negotiations, and he had no idea what he was doing. While he was busy trying to impress Harlan Tech's CEO with luxury dinners and expensive gifts, I was already one step ahead. I met privately with Harlan Tech's board, offering them a better deal, one backed by Victor's network of investors. And just like that, Carter Holdings lost their most important acquisition. The headlines came fast. Carter Holdings fumbles key acquisition as CEO's son mismanages deal. Harlan Tech walks away, citing leadership concerns. I read every article with quiet satisfaction. Elliot had overpromised. He had miscalculated. And he had ultimately pushed Harlan Tech straight into my hands. It wasn't enough to destroy Carter Holdings. Not yet. But it was the first public crack in their foundation. And I knew my father was watching it all unfold. 2 days after the Harlan Tech failure, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. Dad, I let it ring. Then, just as it was about to go to voicemail, I answered. His voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the underlying tension. Nate, I assume you've seen the news. I leaned back in my chair, a slow smile playing at my lips. I have. A heavy pause. Did you have something to do with this? I exhaled softly, letting the silence stretch just long enough. Dad? I said finally, voice smooth. You made it very clear that I was out. Why would I have anything to do with Carter Holdings? Another pause, then a sigh. We need to talk. There it was. The first sign of regret. But I wasn't ready to talk. Not yet. I'm busy, I said smoothly. You'll have to find another time. Before he could respond, I ended the call. For the first time in my life, I was the one walking away from him. I wasn't the only one enjoying the show. That evening, I got a text from Nathaniel Carter, Carter Holdings head of risk management and one of my closest allies. Liam's losing it. He called an emergency meeting today. Blamed internal sabotage. People are starting to question if he knows what he's doing. I smirked. Of course, Elliot was panicking. He had never handled pressure well. And now, with the press scrutinizing him, with investors getting nervous, with key employees walking away, he was drowning. And I wasn't done yet. Because I wasn't just targeting Elliot. I was targeting my father's legacy. Carter Holdings wasn't just a business. It was an institution. It had been built on decades of reputation, on my father's ability to convince people that Carters never fail. But that was exactly what was happening. And all I had to do was let the weight of their own mistakes pull them under. So I made my next move. I called Victor. It's time, I told him. He didn't hesitate. You're sure? I looked out at the city skyline, the empire my father once ruled. Elliot is cracking, I said. My father is doubting him. Investors are getting nervous. If we move now, we can take some of their biggest contracts before they even see it coming. Victor let out a low chuckle. You really are ruthless, Nate. I smiled. But there was no warmth in it. I learned from the best. The trap was set. Now, I just had to wait for them to fall into it. The collapse happened faster than I expected. At first, it was subtle. A few missed deadlines. A quiet reshuffling of executives. Small cracks forming beneath the surface. But then it spiraled. And I made sure I was there to speed up the process. After the Harlan Tech deal fell through, Carter Holdings lost more than just a business acquisition. They lost credibility. Investors weren't just concerned anymore. They were scared. Then came the departures. At first, it was just a few executives, the ones I had personally recruited to my new firm. But soon, the floodgates opened. Key managers left. The people who actually kept the company running walked away. Clients hesitated. Contracts that had once been guaranteed suddenly weren't renewed. Investors started calling my father directly, demanding answers. And the best part? I hadn't lifted a finger. Elliot was ruining the company all on his own. The second call from my father came late at night. I was in my office reviewing a contract for my firm's latest acquisition, one that had once been Carter Holdings' biggest supplier. The irony wasn't lost on me. I let the phone ring 3 times before I answered. Dad. His voice was different this time. Not angry. Not arrogant. Desperate. Nate, listen, we need to talk. In person. I leaned back in my chair, tapping my fingers against my desk. What for? A heavy sigh. Liam is struggling. The board is concerned. There are financial issues that need addressing. Financial issues. That was putting it lightly. The truth was Carter Holdings was bleeding money. Every failed deal, every bad decision Elliot made, all of it had chipped away at the foundation. And you think I can help? I asked, feigning innocence. Another pause. Then, quietly, almost painfully, he admitted. We need you. There it was. For the first time in my life, my father was admitting what I had always known to be true. But it was too late. We met at his office the next morning. The tension in the room was suffocating. Elliot was already there, sitting stiffly in the chair beside my father's desk. His face was pale, his usual cocky smirk nowhere to be found. He knew. They both knew. "Nate," my father began, "we need to restructure the company. The losses have been significant." I folded my arms. "Define significant." He hesitated, then slid a folder across the desk. I opened it. And there it was. Carter Holdings was on the verge of bankruptcy. My father, the man who had built an empire from nothing, had let it crumble in less than a year because he had handed everything to the wrong person. I closed the folder and met his eyes. "What do you want from me?" He exhaled. "Come back. Help us fix this." I could have laughed. I could have thrown the folder back at him and walked out. But I didn't. Instead, I let the silence stretch between us. Elliot, the golden child, was silent now. No arrogance. No entitlement. Just fear. "And if I don't?" I asked, watching my father carefully. He exhaled again, heavier this time. "Then we lose everything." I tapped my nails against the folder. This was it. The moment I had waited for. They had underestimated me. They had discarded me. And now? They were begging for my help. "I'll think about it," I said smoothly, standing up. Elliot's head snapped up. "Wait, what?" "Dad, she can't just. She can do whatever she wants." My father cut him off. Elliot's mouth clamped shut. I turned to leave. I had already won. And the best part? They still had no idea what I was going to do next. I didn't go back to Carter Holdings. I didn't return their calls. I didn't respond to their emails. I didn't even acknowledge the carefully worded letters my father sent, each one more desperate than the last. I let them wait. I let them wonder. And while they were drowning in uncertainty, scrambling to fix the mess they had created, I made my final move. 1 month after that meeting, the news broke. Carter Holdings officially files for bankruptcy amid leadership crisis. The article was brutal. It detailed everything. The failed acquisitions. The mass departures. The fractured leadership. Elliot's name was plastered across every headline. The face of the company's downfall. But the part that interested me the most? The section about their assets. Carter Holdings wasn't just collapsing. It was being sold for parts. And I had been waiting for this moment. I sat in a sleek, modern conference room, watching as a team of lawyers and advisors finalized the paperwork in front of me. The room buzzed with quiet efficiency, a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding within Carter Holdings. My lawyer slid the final contract across the table. "It's official," he said. "Your firm now owns Carter Holdings' most valuable assets." I picked up the pen and signed my name. And that was it. Just like that, I had taken everything. My father thought he was playing a game of power. Elliot thought he was preserving his legacy. But the truth was, they had been playing checkers while I was playing chess. I didn't just take the company. I took the best clients. I took the most profitable divisions. I took the people who had built the business in the first place. And what was left? A hollow shell. A name with no value. A legacy that no longer belonged to them. I didn't expect my father to reach out again. But he did. I was in my office when my assistant knocked. "Miss Carter," she said cautiously. "Your father is here." I looked up from my desk. I hadn't seen him in weeks. "Send him in." When he walked in, I barely recognized him. He looked older. More tired. Like a man who had finally realized just how much he had lost. He stood there for a moment, taking in my office. "My new company. My success." "You really did it," he finally said. "I did." A long silence stretched between us. "You could have helped," he said. "You could have come back. We could have fixed it together." I leaned back in my chair. "No, Dad." I met his gaze. "You could have fixed it. But you didn't want to. You wanted Elliot to be the golden child. You wanted to prove that I wasn't necessary." I gestured around the room. "Now you finally understand what I always knew." I let my words sink in. It was never about the name. It was never about the company. It was about the people who built it. His jaw tightened. He wanted to argue. To justify. To make excuses. But he couldn't. Because he knew I was right. A long pause. Then finally he nodded. A silent admission of defeat. Without another word, he turned and walked out of my office. And this time, I didn't look back.